Planning Commission podcast is a spirited discussion with myself and a couple of my longtime colleagues in the profession. Our discussions are based solely on our own opinions and do not reflect the opinions or views of our employers, the American Planning Association, or even our alma maters. So grab a seat in the back of City Hall, dig out an old copy of Robert's Rules, and for goodness sakes, read your packet. The Planning Commission is now in session.
Welcome to the Planning Commission podcast. Seinfeld, it's the best of all time, right? But why? Commissioner Koslick, Commissioner Smith, why is Seinfeld the best sitcom ever?
Because it's a story about nothing, much like Planning Commission meetings.
Oh, I like that.
It's a timeless story about nothing that is still relevant today, unlike most Planning Commission meetings.
Are you sure? What about that jacket? What about Jerry's jacket? That is not timeless. That was solidly 1992.
Right. So was the hairstyle. But I like both your answers. But if we were playing Family Feud, maybe that'd be like maybe 3 and 2, but certainly not 1. Come on, what is the name of this podcast?
The Planning Commission.
And Seinfeld, if you're a big fan, George wanted to be a
planning commissioner.
He wanted to be an architect. However, true. Okay, caveat. You're right. So to be clear, but he was trying to send the kid to planning school. I remember the episode somehow, right? There was a kid who wanted to be a planner. That's what it was. George wanted to send him to be an architect, but the kid wanted to be a planner. Remember that?
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Finally, someone bailed me out.
I didn't know there was homework for this episode.
Well, we can't just go in,
When I was in planning school, the architecture side of it called us urban planners, the arts and crafters.
Yes.
You can do a lot with a Sharpie, okay? A lot.
Palms and popsicle sticks and gluing them all. Yeah, I get it.
And dots.
All right. Well, on that wonderful note, let's get ripping and roaring here. This episode, sticks and stones can really hurt. Oh my gosh, we've all been there. I think at this stage in our careers, and many planners who've been in this profession or decision makers, whatever your sort of background in the public policy realm is, I don't know what the magic mark is. Maybe by year 5, maybe by year 8, you've probably started to realize that some folks have some not so nice things to say about you. And if you have not had that wonderful experience in your career yet, just wait, because it's coming. It is coming. So this episode, we're going to explore the heck out of that concept with our wonderful guest momentarily. But before we do, I just want to set the stage a little bit and ask my wonderful fellow commissioners, give me a time in your professional life when that might have happened to you. And what did you do about it? What were the lessons that you learned? And how did it maybe make you a better planner? When did somebody, try to disparage you, slander, libel, all the legal terms, right? But give me a sense of when that might have happened. Don, you got something for us to hear?
Yeah, it's something I had a meeting about yesterday, actually.
Yes.
A 6-month process to have a local government agency appoint me to a minor advisory committee for another local government agency has resulted in a change of bylaws to try to keep me off of that committee.
Oh.
It resulted in the board that was appointing me saying, well, just waive your policies. This is the person we want. To then having misinformation spread about me to a couple of mayors about what I do professionally and everything else, to then yesterday, because in our valley, we have a board that has only 3 members on it. So anytime 2 of them are together, they have a quorum. So I had to sit in what was a publicly noticed meeting to basically have a conversation with 2 of the 3 elected members to correct this, and not their fault. I was very appreciative of this body for doing this, but basically went line by line through a newspaper article and answering questions about it. And then here's the funny part, just me being a journalist in this newspaper stuff. The headline even said little known committee, and whatever about little known committee prompted an above the fold headline, I don't know. So I'm in the middle of that. Maybe I will be on this committee. Maybe I will not. One merit of debate is good, and the other one is just a background political ploy by some others that don't like that I know the technical shit behind this and can be a little outspoken, and they've changed bylaws and done a ton of everything just to keep me off a committee that last met in February of this year.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Have they seen your podcast work yet?
No,
but add it to the list.
But the article called out a tweet that I did like back in March, which if you follow me on Twitter, I haven't been on there since then, that basically was the typical cynical Don tweet about how livestock in Idaho have more rights than pedestrians. And
which is pretty true.
Wrong? Yeah.
Well, the humor in it is one of the members I met with yesterday is also a farmer, and we got into something called herd districts, which is apparently a thing in Idaho that's open range and where, yes, cattle and stock do have the right of way, which got me to thinking, if we have herd districts that puts presumed liability on drivers, we should be able to establish pedestrian districts that do the exact same thing. So my wheels are already turning on that.
That is my favorite thing. That is the best.
Herd districts.
But
herd
hey,
districts.
is cattle are they not also pedestrians, or do you have to be a 2-footer?
Well, it's when they get blamed for wearing dark fur.
All the time. You can't see them at night.
No,
it's
they
definitely
never use crosswalks.
Here comes the move joke next, right? There it comes. Move along, pedestrian cow.
What about you, Chris?
Yes,
I've been horrible one.
I don't know that I've been browbeaten in the corner by commissioners with a line by line. That sounds like interrogation, which I did have to go through in POW school, but that's a whole different story.
Oh my gosh.
So I've had my name out there in articles that obviously context, right? And the way things are pulled off and put out there, and things that it's just ridiculous. It's obviously just, I guess the newest term that we can use is sort of clickbait, right? And it's no different. It's yellow journalism that used to exist as a concept 100 years ago. All the newspaper magnates who used to steer all the articles to their interest. It's all a bunch of baloney in so many ways. And it makes it hard for the public to actually understand the truth of the matter, right? And especially if they're not participating in the process. So yeah, I've had that. It hurt. There was a particular incident where, someone just flat out, was directly accusing me of somehow towing the line for the mayor of our city in an application that we had in front of us. And I just thought, come on, man, this is, there's so much detail that you don't understand. And it doesn't, and not to mention, it's like, I have my own mind. Please give me the credit to exercise that mind and use it how I see fit, and my education and experience, and allow me to just be me. I got this, So it was a bit of a learning experience. And I think what I took away from it was, it's real easy to get worked up and pissed off, and you just want to fight back in the world. And I think you can do that, but you definitely have to be smart about it, right? You can't just come out swinging blindly. Otherwise that energy doesn't do anybody any good. But also, hey man, as a planner and in the public sphere, you're going to have to develop a little bit of some thick skin. I know as a sitting commissioner for our city, when we're up there, we get all the time, folks coming up there and claiming we're this and that for the developers or what have you. And it gets tiring, but it's mostly coming from an emotional place, and you just have to kind of let it roll and say, okay, and do your best to explain and let it be the proverbial water off the duck's back. So Jess?
I think every time you're standing up there before a board or the committee or board or whatever, and especially earlier in your career, if it doesn't go the way, and you kind of know it, and you don't know all the political minutia that's happening around it, that can feel very personal, even though it's not. And I think as we go in a career, we evolve to realize, like in my example, one part of the issue isn't personal, and it's not even political. It's just a thing to debate. But the other part is very personal and not correct. And that feels the worst when you have that type of misinformation being spread about you to try to keep you off some, little known committee. Jess?
I mean, similar experiences, throughout the time. One that sticks out, and I cannot remember what the situation was. When I was the planning chief up in Matsu, Alaska, that you know how every planning commission, they have kind of those frequent flyers that come in, and they're these stewards of the public process. And we had someone that would come to every meeting, and I'd never had this happen before. I definitely had people point their finger in my face and say, "I pay your salary as a taxpayer." But then, and that was like, okay, well, in that way, I pay for your kids to go to school. Good luck. I don't know. But the thing that really got to my heart was, as on the planning commission, as the planning chief, I was an ex officio member. I couldn't vote. I didn't, that was not the way it was. I was really there to advise if they had like technical questions, and to make sure the process is going by. They set me right next to whoever was the lead of the planning commission at the time, which is voted on, right? These are all public citizens that they are assigned to these positions and all of that good stuff. So what bugged me though was during public comment, we had open public comment. One of the frequent flyers came up and was very loud and screamed that I should resign because this was such garbage and we were not following our own public process law. Yeah, it was horrible. So anyway, that was really rough, because it was like, wow, I've worked really hard to be a part of a job where I get to serve the public, and I get to do something that's very technical, but also helps my community. And I was just told that I should resign on principle because that particular citizen thought that the whole board was not following the rules. And the thing that was really, really hard about that is, one, it was like, geez, I mean, what do you want me to do? There's like 3 of these jobs in Alaska. And then the other thing was we were following process. And the reason I was up there is because I was an expert in the process. That was what I knew about. That was my job. And it was kind of somebody standing there going, I mean, nobody's looking at the CEO of Pepsi going, you know what? I don't think you know how to make Diet Coke at all. It's like,
they don't. It's horrible.
Diet Coke I know. It's like, they don't know. So, I mean, quit fussing at them.
Diet Pepsi. Sorry, you said
no,
Pepsi.
I meant Diet Coke, because they were telling me that I didn't know how to do certain things. And I was like,
gotta go Diet Dr. Pepper.
I was like, that's not the rules here. So no, that was on purpose.
It sounds like all 3 of us have some pretty deep wounds that we've just barely even opened up, and this is the cathartic nature of this podcast. And I'm sure that some of our listeners, we might have 4 now, by the way. I think we've got, maybe we recruited a family member or 2, but many of those listening to this or watching this, I think can relate to that. So before we turn our podcast attention over to our wonderful guests, it's time for us to turn the page and think about the whiskey that I think all of us could use a nice shot of right about now. Don, what is the whiskey pairing that would go best with Sticks and Stones Can Really Hurt?
Well, I guess from the theme of our guest this week, I'm going to go a little bit off script. I'm going to go, since we're talking to somebody from Sonoma, I'm going to go with a wine.
Oh my gosh, that is my favorite wine in the world.
Now, so
that is my favorite.
Decoy Chardonnay. Now, this is kind of the upper shelf one. It was my fiance's birthday this last weekend, so we had that. But I'm also a firm believer.
I think he just bragged. Did he just brag? Upper shelf. Look at him. Gosh.
Upper shelf. Beyonce. All those fancy terms. I think all of that was French. It was just all straight up French speaking.
Our guests may disagree, but I just tend to think that wines from the Sonoma coast area are far superior to others from that region.
Wow.
I mean, I'm into it.
He is a Southern boy too. I mean, he didn't just call it white wine. He did actually go with Chardonnay and distinction between the various growing areas. I mean, that's impressive. Hey,
Well, now, at some point we'll get a guest on here and we'll go with some muscadine wine and
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Did you know my sister's in-laws have a muscadine wine vineyard? Never mind. Anyway, that's true.
well,
But
it's great for lighter fluid and cleaning off the corrosion on your battery, much
or
like
if you just enjoy
Diet
juice.
Coke.
So
Oh,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah, yeah.
listen, before you wrap up that whiskey wine moment, I need to tell you about Decoy. When I was in wine country one day and I went to not Decoy, but I went to their blend tasting vineyard place, and it's called Paradox. And our guest can fix me on this one if I'm messing this up, but Paradox is where they do a lot of their blends. And I fell in love with that like family of wines. And I think it's spelled Paradox with 2 X's on the end and stuff, but it sounds like Paradox. And there are a couple of us on here today that, maybe that could be us. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, you never know. So
well,
I love Paradox. It's part of those Decoy family wine. And when I go looking for something that's not just like total garbage, I go straight for Decoy.
I'll
So
look for that.
I mean, Decoy, are you hearing this? I mean,
Paradox,
how much
Decoy.
love you just gave him a free ad space.
I
looking for
love them
sponsors.
there. Their staff is amazing. I mean,
Goodness. Okay.
the
all right.
reason Rachel and I know each other is because our mutual friend took me to that place. So, I mean, it's just the world is very small. That's what
All
I
right.
know. And
All
I keep
right. Well,
bringing
enough
things
of
up.
this, enough of us. It's time for us to turn our attention to our wonderful guest who was gracious enough to spend time with 3 monkeys on a Friday. And we appreciate her doing so. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest, Rachel Hundley, current public law attorney and former mayor of Sonoma. Rachel, thank you for joining the Planning Commission podcast.
Good morning. It's morning in California right now.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, yes. Yes, it is. Is it too early to start cracking the Decoy Chardonnay, though?
Never too early, although I've never
Never.
heard the phrase top shelf wine before. So maybe I'll introduce that to the industry.
Wow.
gonna love it.
Yes. Well, we do what we can to coax folks to give us money, I guess.
Well, the muscadine would be the rot gut.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, muscadine. We're not into
stop
you.
it.
So, Rachel, again, thank you for taking the time. I'm just going to let you go and tell us all about you. Give us the Wikipedia version of Rachel and why you're on this podcast and what you're up to and some of those highlights and high points of your career. So over especially the last 10 to 15 years.
Well, I was born in the charming town of Charleston, South Carolina. No, I'm actually I'm a 3rd generation Charlestonian, but that's not why we're here. So I guess I am one of your 4 listeners because I've been listening to your podcast, but I've been adjacent to planning from 2 different perspectives now. The first was as a city council member myself, dealing with planning commission appeals and trying to get people to care about planning issues, which is very difficult as it turns out. And then on the other side, I am a public law attorney and I advise local governments and cities and special districts about issues that sometimes relate to planning. And that's what I do now. But in getting there, so I grew up in the South, college at the University of Georgia, didn't know what I wanted to do. So why not go to law school, University of North Carolina. And I just so happened to get a job in New York City. So I went there. And that is where sort of the plans were put into place that ended up where I am today. Being a corporate attorney, as it turns out, was not as fun as I don't know if I thought it would ever be fun, but so I started planning an escape to move across the country and open a bakery. And the economy helped me out with the economic downturn. I got laid off from my job, took my severance, and moved to California, where I ended up starting a fried chicken business instead here in the charming city of Sonoma. And then, of course, with that wasn't enough to do at the time. So I got wind that it was an election year. And even though I was brand new to the area, and there were 2 open seats, which just seemed like something that I would never see again. So I was like, why don't I run for city council? And so 18 months after the day that I moved here, I was elected to the city council, to the shock of everybody, including myself. Not the least because I ended up pushing out a 16-year incumbent in doing that.
Wow. What was the margin of that? How many votes total?
I want to say it was a small number. It was less than 100.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, for my first election. The second one wasn't such a squeaker. And so, so then I was passionately involved in the city council for a term and a half. I was mayor in 2017, which was an adventure in of itself. But last year, 2021, I decided I was going to retire from politics early so that I could focus on the much more sustainable, I think, side of staffing local governments. So that's what I focus on these days, is trying to help all the little guys stay out of trouble.
Well, quite a story. You went from being a dog to a heel to a New Yorker.
Come on.
To a fried chicken maker. So
and now back to being a heel because you're an attorney. Is that the circle? That's
I thought we were going to get back to the Ducks at some point. What is this?
I'm not a Tar Heel fan. Go Dogs, though.
He is a dog.
Come on.
Yeah. So it does beg the question, though. Does one need to marinate chicken overnight in buttermilk before going through the dredging and stuff? Is that part of your magic?
I do think the buttermilk brine ahead of time helps. And also my preferred method for fried chicken is a spiced flour coat. Definitely not delicious. A batter, but you have to put some sort of flavor in it. Otherwise, you're just basically eating oily cooked flour. And, Drums and Crumbs was the business that I had for 7 years. May she rest in peace. But I think it definitely had the best traditional Southern fried chicken in the Bay Area. And maybe one day it will be resurrected.
That's amazing. It's amazing. So,
well, go ahead. Right.
Jess. Oh, I was just going to ask. So for our listeners, I think that there's more than 3 or 4, and I'm so glad that you're one of them, Rachel. But what I wanted to ask you is, for our listeners who don't know how local government works, like, how does one go from being a city council person to a mayor? And how does that work in Sonoma? Does that work differently other places? And maybe just give us an example of what Sonoma is.
Yes. So this was something that I didn't even know about because one of the reasons that I ended up sort of getting pulled into the gravitational force of local government that has been my focus for the last 10 years is just, I didn't really understand how it all worked. In high school, they never even talked about what the city, I guess there was a city councilor, there must have been, but no one even said the words to me.
You didn't get how the resolution becomes an ordinance thing.
I never even heard of a resolution.
What about Schoolhouse Rock? Didn't that help anybody? No, that was different. No city council there.
And so even so in college and law school, everybody got so focused on federal elections that Barack Obama, who I did vote for, eventually came to the Chapel Hill to speak, and I made a protest T-shirt that said, "Tell me the name of 3 state judges, and I will vote for Barack Obama," because I was like, few people don't even know what's going on. Nobody knows what's happening in their own backyards. So I've been just kind of spiraling down into this just sort of resentful about the lack of attention, which I've noticed. Actually, I think people are paying a lot more attention to what's local these days.
Yeah. But that's something I've said for a long time. I mean, a federal policy gets passed and it gets all the attention, but like federal economic policy can take years to manifest itself. You as a city council can make a decision in April that goes into effect in July and affect everybody in that community's life in a very immediate way. And that is not captured.
You could put in a bike. You could put in a bike lane and ruin everyone's lives. Even.
Oh, is that true? It happens.
Is that a hint? Is that a hint for the next question?
Is there something?
We have?
Is there something you like to tell us about bike lanes? Was there an exciting project?
Something controversial?
It just happened to be one of the very last issues that I had touched on. But I will go back to just a simple structure of cities. So at least in California, you can have two models of kind of elected city government. One is called the strong mayor. So you have a independently elected mayor who acts as your chief executive of the local agency. And then you have a city council that's like the board of directors, and the mayor has certain functions, and the city council is the one that adopts the laws. And then for most cities, it's a strong city manager, or it's a city manager form of government. So you have just a city council. They're the one that adopt all the laws, but then they basically hire an expert who has a career in this field of running governments. And so they do the administrative stuff. The city council, does or should be doing policy direction. And then from amongst them, often the mayor will be selected internally. So that's how it was with my city council. So it was a free gig, a volunteer gig. So I think it was kind of good that it was only a year, but in 2017 was the year that I got selected to be our mayor, and it ended up being a very eventful year.
Is that common there in those systems to have a council select the mayor instead of the mayor being elected in the traditional fashion?
It is, especially for smaller cities. Larger cities, especially with the push to go to voter districts. So instead of having at large, everyone on the city council is voted in from the whole city. Now, especially because of strategic litigation, they're dividing up kind of bigger cities first into voter districts. And so to unify it, now you'll see more of an at-large mayor, and then city councils from districts. But from the little cities like Sonoma, despite its kind of oversized reputation, it's a population of 11,000 people, and it's about 2.25 square miles. So it's actually a very teeny tiny little city. And so I think that I think you're good if you could scramble together 5 half decent people to be on your city council, and maybe not have to commit to a mayor for more than 1 year. It's a good system.
So Rachel, it's so interesting to hear you talk about you being the one to move to California and the new person, because here in Boise, as a P&Z commissioner now, I mean, oh my gosh, we hear that all the time. There's this big confrontation between the local population and that group of folks who are moving in, and whatever the perception is about, their philosophies. But the funny thing is, probably about 1 in every 5 came from California. They just don't want to talk about it. Right. So, but I want to know, talk to me a little bit about that. Like when you came in and you were the new person and you beat this incumbent who was there for 16 years and the previous mayor, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, how on earth did you resonate with voters enough to get them to convince them to vote for you?
The timing of it, I didn't plan any of it myself. I just sort of ended up almost being in the right place at the right time, and was, kind of young and naive enough to just dive into it without even thinking about it. But Sonoma is one of those places where, if you haven't, first, you're not allowed to call yourself a Sonoman unless you've been here for 20 years.
Yes.
And then also it's one of the places where when people get up to do public comment, they will typically precede it by telling everybody how long they have lived here. And so, if anything less than 15 years, and I guess, that comment shouldn't actually count for it. But, something that was amazing to me when I went out and I had to, of course, knock on doors and introduce myself to people, which was terrifying to do, that people were, they were very surprised and amused to see me standing on their doorstep after I told them what I was there to do. And when I got elected, I was the youngest person on the council by almost 20 years. So it was kind of a moment where people were starting to think a little more about the future. I think it was because a lot of the people in town had kids that were in high school and college age. So they were just sort of like thinking ahead. And so here I was, and I guess the fact that I was kind of, and of course, my campaign slogan capitalized on all of this because I had a fresh perspective. So it was,
let's kick out the crumbs and drums and bring in a fresh perspective.
Exactly. So I think that people kind of were ready for something new. And after that, and, it wasn't just me, because if you look around, in the years that followed, there was like a lot of younger people getting into local politics. I feel like I was kind of at the front end of the wave, but the 2016 and 2018 election just nationally saw a lot of young people get involved, and also a lot of women get involved. So it was just kind of at the beginning of a new direction of the wind blowing, I think.
Well, speaking of that new direction, Rachel, you made the news a lot. I remember I was living in Alaska, and I bet you once at a little garden party, and it was fun to hear you because I was doing the staff side of things at the time, and you were doing the public servant side, and I was just going, bless her heart. I don't even know what to say. I'm just going to listen. And then all of a sudden I see you in the Washington Post, and I see, everything, things are happening and things are talking about you. Why do you think you were making the news like that? I mean, Sonoma, 11,000 people. And then what did you do with that? How did you work with that and respond to that?
It was bizarre. And I think part of it is because Sonoma is kind of more widely known, at least in theory, probably because it's just known for its wine country. I don't know. But for some reason, starting when I became mayor and I popped up in the Washington Post, which Gloria Steinem retweeted that article about me, which was insane. And
it's unreal.
What was the premise of the article?
It was about a millennial mayor, and it was about the fact that I had Googled my way into office and just kind of told the story that I kind of showed up, had no idea what I was doing, like literally Googled, like, how do I run for office? And then I did it. So
thank goodness for Google.
And I think that, and after that, what became kind of really fun, kind of adjacent to my city council service, was that I was invited to a lot of different organizations and tech companies down in San Francisco to go and talk about civic participation and, how to run for office, or what are the other ways to be more involved in local government. And so that was kind of a really fun side outlet of just getting to go and basically evangelize like public participation, and people just seemed really interested in wanting to know how it happens. I have told so many people to join commissions over the last 7 years probably, that I would like to think that there's at least a few of them that went through the process and are at least were on one for a while. But so that was kind of the first wave, and then the biggest wave was when my 2018 re-election campaign, which something that I don't think anybody except for people who know me know, is that the reason I ended up on in most major news outlets and a lot of tiny outlets as well was actually the result of a land use decision.
Oh.
And that was?
So this was so Sonoma, if you've ever seen it, it's a very flat city that's kind of bumped up against the arm of a mountain range. It's kind of more like a big hill. But back before my time, the people of Sonoma, I think there was like a resort or something proposed up on this hill, and the people got together and said, like, we don't want to be one of those Bay Area cities that just kind of stacks the hill full of houses and development. So they passed a hillside ordinance that protected this hill from development. It's actually it's preserved open space now, and there's trails, so you can just like literally within the city go on a nice nature hike. But there was one of our wealthiest residents of Sonoma who had a mansion estate up on this hill, wanted to build 2 more mansions next door to his.
But of course.
And
land rights.
and so his philosophy was just that he was just going to like like ram it down everybody's throats. He had like PR people, and he had this really nasty developer, and sort of all these people like kind of geared for this battle, but the people were not going to let this happen. So then the people rise up on the other side, and there's just this like war happening between these sides about the, protecting this, somewhat ecologically delicate hillside. And in the end, it was very nasty. I was mayor that year, so a lot of it was directed at me, but the project was denied. The city was sued. The lawsuit was thrown out. And the next thing I know, when I'm running for re-election in 2018, I get this email one day that the gist of it was that I was too immoral to be in office. So if I should reconsider my candidacy, otherwise my campaign would be one of full disclosure. And it had a link to a hit website they had made about me. I think it was something like whoisrachelhundley.com or something. And it was the meanest thing I'd ever seen. It was also like hilariously cartoonishly villainous, but it was like really mean. Had a bunch of weird stuff on it. And so that is what inspired me to I was a millennial. I will speak to the people via YouTube. So I recorded a YouTube video, posted it, and it ended up going viral. And so people all over the country got to read about a tiny little city council race in Sonoma, which, by the way, I ended up winning with the most votes in the history of this race.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I have in my head that story of like this 6-part Netflix series just called Sonoma.
Calling
that's
Netflix.
about a land
Netflix.
use battle. That's kind of really a land use battle that encapsulates a lot of the other just modern cultural things and stuff, right? I mean, there's a whole avocado toast angle in there. There's the wine stuff. There's the old guard, new guard. Yeah.
So,
I like that idea.
Rachel, with the theme of this show in this episode, the whole notion of sticks and stones can really hurt. I'm guessing with, what you just described, you had some moments that at least maybe privately and maybe even publicly, you were getting raked over the coals, like unfairly because of a decision that had nothing to do with, anything that was being put out there to the public. But how did you deal with that? How did you cope? I mean, it must have been a pretty challenging time for you, but somehow, you fought back. You said enough is enough for one thing, but what else? How did that time in your life go?
It kind of it sort of peaked at that point, but I had noticed very early on, especially I think Sonoma is a place where people do pay attention, and they are very opinionated. They care very loudly about what goes on here. And so the first time I had kind of walked into a very controversial issue, as it turns out. I was early on in my city council career, and it was the issue of leaf blowers, which, I could talk about leaf blowers for probably an entire episode. And one day I want
Chris. Yeah.
Yes.
Excuse me, leaf blower. Is it a sound situation?
Oh, it's a lot of things. It depends. There's a different reason du jour as to why these things. I could talk about that one for a while, but I'll keep moving on. But it actually, and it ended up being like so controversial, and people got really angry about it, and the newspaper ended up writing this editorial about me because I ended up changing my mind about this, and people got really mad at me. And the name of the editorial is Of Hearts and Minds and Leaf Blowers. And so that was the first time, and something that I just learned along the way. My philosophy for dealing with people who vehemently disagreed with me was, and most times, if I could sit across for them over a cup of coffee and just hear them out, talk about the way that I saw things, at the end, even if they still disagreed with me, I found that like most people actually still respected me afterwards. So that was most people. And to me, either people were in that group or they honestly just didn't matter to me. Like if people are just gonna come and yell at me in a meeting, or even worse, like bring sort of people well, I'll save that one for
We
another
all
day.
know.
So
we know, it's just.
Well, Jess said the
it's tough.
frequent flyers, I heard it
Yeah.
term last, it was STP, same 10 people.
Yeah,
That kind of end up there. So I think we're going to go into some rapid fire
yes.
questions now to wrap up. So I'm going to let Chris kick that off.
Well, I would be remiss if I see it comes back to Seinfeld, because instead of comedians in cars getting coffee, it's adversaries talking politics over coffee, right? Coffee is the solution to all things. I'm a big coffee fan, and I would completely agree with that. So 100%. So let's take a little bit of time and get to know you and some fun things a little bit. But I'd have to ask this question. I mean, my gosh, you've gone from Georgia, North Carolina, and New York, and Sonoma. Your go-to cocktail?
I'm actually a gin and tonic
woman.
What a good Southern girl. I love it.
Yes.
So is Nashville, this is the Nashville hot chicken craze all it's cracked up to be?
Oh, I think it's highly overrated. And I think most places that sell what they describe as Nashville hot chicken are not actually serving Nashville hot chicken.
Of course not. So if there is that multi-part series, The Millennial Mayor of Sonoma, what actress would play you, or actor? Who's going to play you?
Oh God. See, I'm terrible at anything that has to do with pop culture because I just don't know.
Oh, just say somebody you like, I guess. They played this part. It could be Jessica Rabbit. We don't care.
I actually the same with asking me what my favorite movie is. I haven't seen most movies, and I will tell you what my favorite TV show is right now. It's called Forged in Fire, and it's a panel competition show about making knives. So that's where I am with my media consumption.
Well, what's funny about that rapid fire question is, as I was writing it, I was thinking, you know what? Probably a better question for Rachel is, what's your favorite book of all time?
Oh God.
North Carolina Bar Law, Volume 5.
Well, it's not a very terribly exciting or salient answer, but right now, my favorite writer right now is Catherine May. She wrote a book called Wintering, and I think the book I'm listening to now is called The Electricity of Every Living Thing. So
sounds amazing.
Completely unrelated to anything we've discussed, but that's what I've been enjoying.
That's what these questions are all about.
I don't see you wearing it. I've only heard wind of it. You still have a Nasty Woman t-shirt?
Well, it's a tank top, and these days, yes, that's my famous tank top that was in the first Washington Post article that was written about me, but I only wear it on selective occasions these days because I'm trying to make sure it doesn't get worn out.
That's fair.
I think I know who would. I have an idea on who might be good to play you, and I know you don't know who I'm talking about, but you might. So, and being that you're a fan of Google and YouTube, Natalie Portman, I think you would. She'd be a great person, great, outstanding actor, and resemblance, and I think she'd kick ass. So
I'll take it.
Right.
It's amazing.
Natalie Portman. What rocks about Sonoma?
Oh, Sonoma. It's very, it's beautiful. The weather is just stunning. It's just a very small, tight-knit community, which, starts to mean something very different when you realize you can't go to the grocery store without running to at least 7 people that which is sort of how it was when I was kind of peak involvement in local politics here. But it's just nice to be somewhere where people care very much, and that is why I pay a premium to rent here.
No doubt about it. Well, Rachel Hundley, it's been a pleasure to have you in our commission chambers, and we thank you for sharing your story. Amazing journey. And the journey's far from over. You're really just getting started. I think your future is going to be a white hot nova of a future, and we look forward to seeing what becomes of that. So thank you for your time, and we appreciate everything that you've contributed to today. So with that, this episode is also in the can. Fellow commissioners, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Removed.
Second.
Awesome. Last thing, Rachel being in Sonoma as Niner country and me being a Rams fan, go Rams. This has been fun. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye, everybody.